Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. Arlecchino's kit has finally been finalized. Hopefully. Anyways, even if there are changes, I am pretty sure it won't be a drastic change. So I decided to make a final complete build guide for her, which includes everything you need to know. Let's start with simplifying her complicated kit. Arlecchino's whole kit revolves around Bond of Life. Let's first start with Arlecchino's primary source of damage, her normal attacks. Arlecchino in her normal attacks performs 6 consecutive strikes. When Arlecchino's Bond of Life is equal to or greater than 30% of her max HP, she will gain Pyro Infusion and deal increased damage that scales off her attack and current Bond of Life percentage, which means more Bond of Life equals more damage. Each normal attack consumes 7.5% of her Bond of Life every 0.03 seconds. Her normal attacks further reduce her skill cooldown by 0.8 seconds per hit, which is crucial as her skill cooldown is 30 seconds. The best thing is that the Pyro Infusion stays, even if she leaves the field, which makes your rotation quite flexible. Now, how do we get Bond of Life? This is where her elemental skill and passive comes into play. Using her elemental skill marks the enemy. Using charged attack or her burst on the marked enemy will absorb the mark and give you Bond of Life, depending on the amount of time passed since the mark has been applied. From 0 to 4 seconds, you will get 65% Bond of Life, and if 5 seconds have passed, you will get 130% Bond of Life. Maximum Bond of Life that can be gained this way is 145%. Additionally, taking down an enemy with the mark will instantly give you 130% Bond of Life. For single target, you need to wait for 5 seconds after applying the mark to get the maximum amount of Bond of Life. Arlecchino cannot be healed by any other character. She can only be healed from her burst. The burst healing scales of 50% of her Bond of Life plus 150% of her attack. This can cause survivability issue for Arlecchino, as this healing may not be enough, which makes her a glass cannon. The burst resets her skill cooldown, which is great, as the elemental skill has a huge cooldown of 30 seconds. However, she can reduce the skill cooldown from her normal attacks, and if the rotation is around 20 seconds long, you can get her skill ready by the next rotation without using her burst. But the burst skill reset makes her rotations more consistent, as you won't always be able to keep normal attacking for 20 seconds and get her skill up for the next rotation. Additionally, she gets 40% pyro damage bonus and 20% elemental and physical resistance from her passives. Now, let's see how her rotation will be. As I mentioned earlier, for single target, you would want to wait for 5 seconds after applying the mark to get the maximum amount of Bond of Life. So her general rotation will be like this. Use elemental skill at the start. You will need to wait for at least 5 seconds to get the mark ready. So till then, switch to your supports to set up your buffs, and then switch back to Arlecchino to absorb the mark with her charged attack and spam your normal attacks. Then end the rotation with her burst. This rotation can change depending on your situations. For example, if you manage to get her elemental skill back up before using her burst, then you can use her skill, then use her burst for more healing, as more Bond of Life gives more heal. You don't need to do a charged attack after using the skill, as her burst can absorb the mark too. Her burst can be skipped with strong shielders like Zhongli, where healing is unnecessary, but I know you guys are down bad for her and don't want to miss seeing the amazing burst animation. And that's all you need to know about her rotations. It can be modified according to your needs. Like, you can extend the rotation for a few seconds by using the skill second time if it gets reset on time before using her burst. But it is only possible if you are not dying, and if your rotations can be extended, for example, with characters that have long-lasting buffs like Chevreuse. For her talent priority, you only need to worry about her normal attacks. Her elemental skill and burst are not much of an upgrade. And healing from her burst also depends on her Bond of Life and attack, and not the skill level. So this is quite convenient, as Arlecchino will need new materials for leveling her talents. So max the normal attacks first, then you can think about her other talents. Moving on to her weapons, the best in-slot weapon for Arlecchino would be her signature weapon, Crimson Moon's Semblance. It has a high base attack of 674 and gives 22.1% crit rate. On hitting an enemy with a charged attack, it gives Bond of Life equal to 25% of max HP. This effect can be triggered every 14 seconds, which means you can consistently trigger it for her every rotation. Additionally, it gives extra damage bonus. However, This weapon only works on Arlecchino, and no other character can benefit from it. So F2P players can consider skipping it, as there are other amazing weapon options for her. Most of the other 5-star polearms are a decent option for Arlecchino. Staff of Scarlet Sands is the second best option for vape teams. Primordial Jade-Winged Spear and Staff of Homa are extremely close in terms of damage, with the Primordial Jade Spear being slightly better. But it will depend on your artifacts. If you have less crit damage, Homa will be better, and if you have less crit rate, Primordial will be better. Calamity Queller, Vortex Vanquisher are all decent options for her. Now, for the 4-star options, Deathmatch is the best 4-star option as it provides a huge amount of crit rate and increases attack from its passive. The other BP weapon, Battle of the Fjords, is only usable in vaporized teams, as the Elemental Mastery is valuable only in vaporized teams, and it requires your team to have 3 different elements. So in short, not a great weapon, don't buy it. However, these Battle Pass weapons are not needed, as R5 White Tassel, which is completely free, is also a decent option. So I wouldn't recommend you to spend your money. White Tassel provides crit rate and increases the normal attack damage by 48%, which is great for Arlecchino, as normal attacks are her primary source of damage. It does have a low base attack, but you can make up for it by using her with Bennett. If you fed all your White Tassels, here are some other options. R5 Missive Wine Spear is a similar option to the R5 White Tassel, and can be slightly better if there are no attack buffers in the team or in vaporized teams. Do note that this weapon cannot be used in monopyro teams, as you need to do reactions to trigger its passive. Dragon's Bane, especially at R5, can be used in vaporized teams. Blackcliff Polearm, Lithic Spear are viable options. Before moving on to her artifact sets, if you are enjoying this video so far, do consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Share this video with your friends. Arlecchino's best in slot artifact set is going to be the new set in 4.6, Fragment of Harmonic Whimsy. This set is tailor-made for Arlecchino. 2-piece gives 18% attack. When the value of Bond of Life increases or decreases, the character deals 18% increased damage for 6 seconds. Maximum of 3 stacks, which means you can get 54% increased damage, and with Arlecchino, it is extremely easy to trigger this set. However, this set is not much of an upgrade over 4-piece Gladiator's Finale, as this set buffs normal attacks by 35%, which is the main source of damage for Arlecchino. Additionally, this set can be strong boxed. I believe most of us should have a good 4-piece of this set, as it has been there in the game since the start. But if you don't, here are some alternatives. You can just mix and use sets that give attack percent, Crimson Witch or 2-piece of Marechaussee Hunter. Gilded Dreams is a great option for vaporized teams. Desert Pavilion Chronicle is also a viable set if you don't have good Gladiator pieces. Although the 2-piece bonus is wasted on Arlecchino since it's Animo damage bonus. The 4-piece will increase her attack speed and normal, charged, and plunging attack damage by 40%. Crimson Witch of Flames is also a good option for vaporized teams. However, in Monopyro or Chevreuse Overload teams, it is not that great, as the 4-piece only buffs reaction damage and Overload reaction doesn't deal much damage. Lava Walker is a viable set for Monopyro teams. Echoes of an Offering can also be used, but you need good ping to consistently trigger its set effect. Retressing Bolide can be used with a strong Shielder. Now for Arlecchino's energy requirements. If you have Zhongli in your team, you can choose not to build any energy recharge on her, as you can skip using her burst, as the healing will become unnecessary. Otherwise, her burst is quite important, as it is the only way for sustaining. Also, bursting consistently means you will get to see the amazing burst animation. Arlecchino's burst cost is 60. The amount of energy you need on her highly depends on your team, how many Pyro teammates you have, and Favonius holders. So the numbers that I am going to mention, use them as general guidelines. In Monopyro teams, around 120% should be enough. In vaporized teams, try to aim for around 130 to 140% energy recharge. For Overload Chevreuse teams, if you have Fischl in this team and another Electro teammate, which will unlock the Electro Resonance, you can have around 110 to 120% energy recharge. Having a Favonius user in the team can further reduce her energy requirements by around 10 to 20%. Moving on to her artifact stats. Her artifact stats are quite straightforward, just like a typical DPS. Attack percent on Sands. If you are using her in vaporized teams, you can use Elemental Mastery Sands. Arlecchino doesn't vaporize on her every hit, so using an attack Sands can be slightly better, but it also depends on your substats. Use the one on which you have better substats. For her Goblet, Pyro Damage Bonus Goblet. And for Circlet, use crit rate or crit damage depending on your stats. Alternatively, Attack Goblet also works as Arlecchino gains damage bonuses from her passive signature artifact set or Kazuha. But with attack buffers like Bennett or Chevreuse, Pyro damage bonus gets better. But it is a viable option if you don't have good Pyro damage Goblet. For artifact substats, try to get the required amount of energy recharge, then look for crit stats and attack percent. Elemental Mastery is also decent if you are using her in vape teams. Now let's move on to her team comps. Arlecchino is quite flexible and has many great team options like Mono Pyro, Chevreuse Overload, Vaporize, Double Geo teams, and many more. Let's start with the Mono Pyro team. This team is quite simple. You use Pyro sub DPS and supports along with an Animo buffer, with Viridescent, preferably Kazuha, or defensive characters like Zhongli. For Pyro characters, we have Bennett, Xiangling, Dihya, and Toma as defensive characters. So, your team composition will look like Arlecchino, Xiangling, Bennett, Kazuha, or Zhongli. This is the premium Mono Pyro team. Other alternatives include Arlecchino, Dihya, Bennett, Kazuha, Arlecchino, Xiangling, Bennett, Zhongli, and many more. Do keep in mind these are just examples to give you an idea of how these teams can be made. One thing to keep in mind while using Bennett, he can apply Pyro Aura on you, which lets the enemies proc reactions on you like burn, vaporize, melt, that can instantly kill you, and is not ideal for a fragile character like Arlecchino. So I personally will prefer using a defensive character like Zhongli with Bennett against such enemies, even if this team with Kazuha has a higher damage ceiling. Moving on to the Chevreuse Overload team. As Chevreuse's buffs are pretty long-lasting and Arlecchino has a pretty long rotation, so these two characters pair with each other quite well. Along with Arlecchino and Chevreuse, for the next two slot, you need characters that can fit in these long rotations. And the perfect characters for those two slots are Fischl and Yae Miko, as you can easily have 100% uptime on their elemental skills. And quick swap teams like this are much easier to play with Arlecchino, as you can easily swap back to Chevreuse, Fischl, or Yae Miko to refresh the buffs and skills. But if you don't have Yae Miko, you can use any other Electra sub DPS like Beidou, Kuki Shinobu, Lisa, or Raiden Shogun, or a Pyro support or sub DPS like Dihya, Toma, Bennett, or Xiangling in her place. But I wouldn't recommend using Bennett against light enemies, as Overload can push them back, and that means you can easily get out of Bennett's circle. Arlecchino, Chevreuse, Yae Miko, Fischl is the premium team and has the highest damage ceiling in Chevreuse Overload teams. However, due to the lack of defensive options, it can be a bit difficult to play with, so you can incorporate some defensive characters in this team. Arlecchino, Chevreuse, Dihya, or Toma, Fischl. Arlecchino, Chevreuse, Beidou, Fischl are some examples. Now for the vape teams, here you will need a Hydro sub DPS, and we only have two that can be used, Xingqiu and Yelan, with Xingqiu having better application and Yelan having more damage and buffs. However, Arlecchino cannot vaporize all her normal attacks, but nevertheless, this is also a great team option as Yelan and Xingqiu are a very strong offensive teammates. And the other slots can be buffers like Animo characters, Bennett, or defensive characters like Zhongli or Dihya. Some team examples include Arlecchino, Kazuha, Yelan, Zhongli. This is the premium version. Zhongli can be replaced with Bennett for more damage buffs, but you better not do that if you have skill issue. Arlecchino, Xingqiu, Yelan, Zhongli for more consistent vaporize hit. Arlecchino, Xingqiu, Sucrose, Bennett if father ate all your primos. These are not the only team options. You can use her in other teams like Double Geo team with Zhongli and another Geo character that can be Shiori, Albedo, or Yunjin, and the other slot is Flex, preferably another Pyro like Bennett or Xiangling for the Pyro Resonance, or Kazuha. So your team composition will look like Arlecchino, Bennett, Zhongli, Shiori, Arlecchino, Bennett, Zhongli, Yunjin. You can mix overload and vaporize reaction to make overvape teams like Arlecchino, Xingshu, Fischl, and a flex option like Zhongli, Dihya, Bennett. In most of the teams here, Zhongli can be substituted with Dihya or Toma for defensive options. Lastly, Arlecchino has counter synergy with Farina. As much as you wish to use them together, it is very difficult to use them in a team as Farina constantly drains HP, which is not ideal for a fragile character like Arlecchino who cannot be healed. However, you can use Farina, Zhongli, and a team-wide healer like Jean and use them in Arlecchino's teams. Getting max fanfare stacks can be an issue here with C0 Farina, but this team still works. You can use Xianyun, Farina, and Zhongli to make a plunge Arlecchino team for a different playstyle. I won't say that any of the team here is specifically her best, as all of them are great, and I believe you can create many more teams than what is mentioned here. Feel free to comment them below if you know any. So, yeah, try out her teams and use the one that suits your playstyle. Moving on to her constellations, her C1 further boosts her normal attack's damage and gives her interruption resistance. Even though this interruption resistance is not as good as Eula's, it can be comparable to Xingshu's Rain Swords. Her C2 removes the 5 seconds wait time of her mark and instantly lets you get the maximum amount of Bond of Life from her elemental skill mark. Additionally, when she absorbs the mark, she unleashes a powerful AoE Pyro attack, which is 900% of her attack. This bonus attack has a cooldown of 10 seconds. Her C3 increases her normal attack level by 3. This is a significant damage upgrade as Arlecchino's most of the damage comes from her normal attacks. Her C4 reduces her burst cooldown and restores energy, which reduces her energy requirements. C5 increases her burst level by 3, which is not a significant increase unless she is C6. In her C6, Arlecchino's burst damage is increased by her attack multiplied by 700% of her current Bond of Life percentage. For 20 seconds after she uses her skill, both her normal attacks and elemental burst gain 10% increased crit rate and 70% increased crit damage. This effect can be triggered up to once every 15 seconds. As usual, her C6 is broken, but her C1 is a significant damage upgrade of about 25% over C0, which is great for F2P players who wish to get more damage from Father. I would say her C1 is totally worth it. Let me know in the comments how many copies of Arlecchino are you going to get. And that's all for this video. Don't forget to like and share the video and subscribe for more Genshin Impact content. Thanks for watching.